Okay, Patrick, you're retiring from Luxaviation, formerly London Executive Aviation. Let's take us right back to the start. How did you end up launching an operator with George and Amanda?
Right. I was born on the 13th of January, 1950. No, we better skip the first few years, I think, actually. I was working in the city. I was trained as a chartered accountant at Ernst & Young up in Newcastle. Then I came down into the city and I was doing corporate finance for a number of years. Then I had a back accident and I stopped work. I retired for the first time. And then when I was at age 32, and then I started doing corporate advisory work for people in the city, business plans, acquisitions and such like. And my wife had brought me a flying lesson in the late 80s, or very late 80s. And she found somebody that would fit in with my lifestyle. I used to phone up the instructor at 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, and for an 8 o'clock start, and drive all the way around the M25 for my flying lesson, and go into the office afterwards. The flying instructor was turns out to be a very good friend of George and Amanda Gannonopoulos. And they were working at Stapleton Flying Centre, and they wanted to set a business up. So they said to Kim Wiley, the instructor that taught me who now flies for NetJets, they said, do you know anybody that knows how to put a business plan together? And he said, I might have a business card from 2 or 3 years ago from a chap that I used to teach in the city. So he managed to find my business card. I got a phone call from George. We met up and we went from there.
And looking back, do you regret it?
No, it's a fantastic time of my life. I mean, we put the plans together in 1995. We came to an agreement in beginning of 96, and we had our first flight in a Seneca PA-34 on April Fool's Day, 1994. First flight ever, going up to, I think it was Birmingham, taking somebody up to Birmingham back.
And were those you were working part-time in those early years?
Yeah, I was only working 1 day a week. Occasionally it might be 2, depending on what was happening. I'd be sort of going in, assisting in terms of the development of the company. As and when we found potential aircraft owners, George and I would go along to sort of talk to them. And then gradually over time, I moved. I was living in Chiswick at the time, or Holland Park initially, then Chiswick. And I thought after about 3 or 4 years, I needed to increase my time spent there. So I searched for a house, and we moved into just outside Epping in 2002. I became full-time just before then.
And that was just, so 2001, what was the toughest period you went through as a business?
As LEA, I'd say the recession, 2008 and on. Initially, we were driven through by our belief in what we were doing. I mean, we were penny pinching everything, watching what we spent, every single penny. We self-funded it, myself and George self-funded it, so we didn't get external investors in. And but to 2008, because we were doing like everybody else, we were doing quite very well. 2005, 2006, 2007, and then when we got hit in August 08 or September 08, the business just collapsed off the floor. It was similar to what's happened in the COVID-19. The business dropped off 95, and that's the hardest time we went through. And I think I'm right in saying the hardest decision was actually when we had to go through the process of redundancy and laying some people off. And I believe I'm right in saying we were the first operator to actually lay any staff off. We were very concerned about how it would be seen. As a result of that, everybody else started laying staff off.
Why didn't you raise finance? Because you that was something you were an expert at. You could have gone out at any point and found an investor.
I could have gone out at any point to try to raise it, but if you look at the industry now, raising money is an extremely difficult process. I mean, we were dealing with small piston aircraft at the time and turboprops. And if you look at the likes of the large corporate, NetJets, that's big and self-funded, but it's funded by one of the richest men in the world for his decision process. I think banks saw it as a very high risk process, because we did actually look at it a couple of times during our years before 2008. And it was all, well, this is all very difficult. The margins aren't good enough, etc., the usual scenario.
Traditionally, people go into the market and find an owner, and then get the owner to fund the business.
Yeah, well, that's very true. But we didn't do it in that respect. We bought 2 aircraft, Seneca and a PA-31 Navajo, and we we built upon the business that Stapleford had, and we just went out and knocked on people's doors and marketed ourselves to do it ourselves. And I think one of the things is when you have an owner buying it, funding it, you're not really not owning the business. You're on the ship, but you're not really steering its direction. You're being told the direction it's going to go in, and the owner is dictating to you what's going to happen.
How hard is it competing with other businesses where, there's a lot of operators which are cost centers for the owner, where the owner will get in a few friends, but they're not looking to make money, they're just looking to break even. That must be very hard to compete against.
It is. The falls in two parts. If it's a smaller aircraft, which is what we happened, if someone's buying this, if an owner's bought a Citation 2 or a Citation XL and is letting it run as a cost base, you can only sell yourself from the level of service that you get. And I think we were fortunate enough to have George and Amanda extremely good at marketing and providing the service once it was given. And if we had an aircraft go tech, we all sub-chartered out and sort of let it go on. And I think the smaller people who have an owner, a lot of them become disillusioned after 2 to 4 years, and they fold the company because they realise that the promises they were given of massive profits doesn't actually happen.
Would you, obviously you're retiring now, but if one of your children came to you and said, I want to go into this business, I want to set up an operator, what would you say?
Fortunately, I'm not in that position because my daughter does art, so she's not that interested in business. And my eldest son is going into work in the city at a bank, investment bank. He's got an extremely good job, which he starts in September. And my youngest son has already got some offers at law firms, having with his second year at Cambridge. And I think he's very interested in law, and he doesn't see business for the sake of it. My older son probably will go into another business. They did actually ask me a few years ago whether I'd give them business. I said I could give you that opportunity, but it won't make massive profits. I've seen small operators, medium-sized operators, large operators, people with different models, the air taxi process with the let's buy 70 aircraft and make a lot of money out of it. But that's I don't see a lot of money being made unless someone can sell a story.
And what sort of story should they sell?
Well, you best ask Thomas Floor that, shouldn't you? VistaJet.
Okay, we'll move on. When you started the business, when did you know it was going to work?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't thought of that question before. I think we drew up a business plan, which all of us realised was probably very optimistic. And I say it's an optimistic plan. But it was when, after about 4 or 5 years, when we'd moved on, we accumulated a total of something like 14 or 15 piston aircraft. At that time, we hadn't even moved into turboprops, let alone jets. And then we got a banker who wanted a turboprop, and he was happy. And then when he left to go to America, we bought his turboprop off him. And then we also initially, there was a time when we looked after Sir Alan Sugar, well, Lord Sugar now, his aircraft as well. He lived locally. And so I think once we started seeing owners of importance happy to give their aircraft to us, that we realised we were onto a winner. And I think the core thing is providing the level of service, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong in a flight, and they do go wrong in flights regularly. It's not smooth. So you're like a duck, smoothly on the top, or a swan rather, I suppose, and you're rapidly paddling underneath the waterline.
During the period, you've had lots of owners. What's the typical gripe of an owner in this industry?
They get very upset if their plane goes tech. All planes go tech, but they all go AOG. You explain this to people, and they go, well, such and such, when I was touting around who to go to, said they didn't go. They said it was fine. There'd be no issues. Whereas we've always said to them, got your aircraft, this is your requirements. We will do our best to look after it. There will be occasions when the aircraft is going to go AOG, and you're going to have to bear with that with a sub-charter or changing your plans for dealing with that. And then you get oddities with an owner. If someone gets the catering wrong for their wife or their children, and that we've been doing it for 5 or 6 years, and it's in the systems that they want Maltesers packets of, or Milky Bars or Mars bars, and you make a mistake there. It doesn't sound much of a mistake, but for some owners it can be a big mistake.
What's the do you think industry is good value to owners?
I think it's not a profit center for owners. it's a cost reduction. And given how much aircraft, particularly the larger jets, cost per annum, fixed costs with the crewing and their maintenance and engine reserves, it's a valuable contribution towards reducing their cost base for if they allow it to be chartered.
When you launched the business back in the 90s, was it as competitive now to win management contracts?
No, we were the small end when we first started up, and we were up against sort of one-man bands with one aircraft or two aircraft, and I think we found that comparatively easy. But then as we got into the jets, it was bigger, and people always say, but you're not NetJets, you're not at the time Gamma, you're not. And so people perceived that size was the only key factor to having their big aircraft looked after. So we had to get through that process. And I think once we started getting one or two aircraft, our subsequent aircraft that came in, a lot of them came from referrals from the people that we were actually looking after.
And does size matter?
Well, what do you think?
With operators.
Size can matter, but if you lose that bespoke one-to-one relationship with the owners, or the owners' right-hand people, then it can go. No matter how big you are, it can go wrong. People they like to have a degree of pampering, because although it's a functional tool, it's also a luxury functional tool. They want to be seen that everything's going smoothly.
When did you decide to sell the majority of the business to Luxaviation?
Well, we actually sold in May 14, and I think in June 13.
And did you approach them?
Nope. I was approached probably once, maybe twice every 2 or 3 years by somebody who wants to buy, they wanted to invest in. Some were just people who clearly didn't understand the value of money, and they liked the idea of owning a private aviation company. Others were advisors who were looking to advise their clients about an acquisition. We had probably, before May 14, we probably had 3 serious discussions. One with an individual who his final offer was just not worth looking at. It sort of started at one figure and then went down rapidly, and then it had all these conditions on it. So we'd stopped actively looking, other than when we did the air taxi with the Mustangs, which was a separate race you may or may not come on to. We'd actually stopped looking, and then we got approached by Lux's advisors in London. And they said, what do you want? And I said, look, we've been approached a number of times. It normally falls down upon understanding of the business, money, or the tie-ins that you're putting on. And I said, this is our business that we are. Go away and make an offer. We'll either say yes or no. And we left it at that. And then they came back and said, how much do you want? And I said, no, tell me what you want to pay. And then we'll discuss. Then I'll discuss it with George, and then we'll say yes or no. So they came back with a figure which was acceptable, and we went forward from there. I mean, they were a very, very competent firm. They were very good at getting into the detail and the due diligence and understanding the processes and how we were different to other operators in terms of the model that we operated. And I think for us, it's an extremely good decision.
Really? You don't have any regrets?
No, I mean, the only minor regret is that, since 14, George and I haven't been in charge of the whole entity. So we're running our bit of the entity. I mean, I think that was a change for us, where we weren't the top of the pyramid anymore, and that takes getting some used to.
Yeah, after 20 years of your own business, it's very hard, I thought.
But then again, I had my namesake in charge, Patrick Hansen, and another Patrick, and he's extremely good. He's very focused, he's very clear, and he cuts straight to the points when issues are raised within the group.
Do you think Luxaviation will get much bigger soon, or is it at the right size?
I think it will get bigger. I mean, Patrick's has stated its goal a few years ago was to be, I think off the top of my head, 500 aircraft. And I think that still is the goal. I mean, the aim, whether one achieves 500 or 350 or 700, I don't think really that's the issue. The issue is having something that has value and provides the service that it can to the clients, and has a continuity of the client base, and it doesn't have a turnover of clients.
I remember talking to Patrick, gosh, I think maybe a year ago, where he was saying that when he first came in, he thought he could consolidate businesses. But then he had management teams like you and George and the other Luxaviation entities where you had the owner relationship. And that's the real value in the business. So it's hard, isn't it, to consolidate different operators?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, NetJets operates on a different basis. They operate on a corporate institution basis, as I think really Gamma does as well. It's a corporate. It provides a service and a product, and people buy into it for the size and the historical service that's been provided. We, like many other operators, have changed it a little bit, ask about face. We're not trying to minimise our involvement with the owners. We're trying to maximise our involvement with the owners, and that's a different sort of philosophy and approach. And that takes time, and also that takes drive and energy. And you can't necessarily get a manager who's never owned a part or all of the business to actually have the right mindset to continue that process.
Okay, you've mentioned competitors. Which of the competitors do you admire the most?
I admire most of the competitors that I come across, whether they're small, medium, or large, actually. And I think it'd be wrong of me to sort of prefer one over another, because all of them have their advantages, and all of them, including ourselves, have our disadvantages. Not major ones, but sort of different approach, different styles. Which doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a diplomatic answer.
That's a good. I'm not looking for diplomacy. Let's go back to the light jet market. You got very excited about this in sort of 2006, 2007, didn't you?
Well, we got excited before then, actually, Al. There was a company called Sapphire Jets, I think. Remember the Sapphire Jet? Sapphire first, then Eclipse. So Sapphire Jets, we looked at. We put orders in for 3 Sapphire Jets. That never came to anything. We got our money back. Then we had orders for 2 Eclipses, and again, we got our money back because Cessna launched the Mustang. We took delivery on I think 06, but we made our orders 4 years before, 02, I think it was. So we ordered 10 Mustangs in 02. In the end, we only took delivery of 5 of them, and then we sold the other 5 on just to get our money back to other people that wanted them.
Why didn't it work?
We were believers in the air taxi model about high volume usage, but the Mustangs are. I mean, and I think ultimately we were wrong in terms of being able to make money. The break-even point on the Mustang was around 520 hours per annum to cover all your costs and ongoing costs, and then anything after that would contribute to the profitability of the company. But actually, although the aircraft are available a lot of time, there's a lot of time on the ground. A Mustang only flies for 2 hours. Your trips are 50 minutes an hour, and you're not going, and you're on day returns. You can't just sort of go to Paris and then automatically know you can pick someone else up late on in the morning to go somewhere else to come back to Paris to take them back again. It just doesn't actually work out if you think about it. People want total control over their departure time, which invariably means early on in the morning. So the fact that your aircraft's free at 10 o'clock, and it's sitting in Paris, that's probably too late. People want to have left it 3 hours before, and then controlling it to get back again just doesn't sort of work again. I mean, I think Blink saw that. I mean, they were a great believer in doing over 1,200, 1,500 hours in an aircraft. And for low range aircraft, I don't think that's feasibly possible. You can with a Dassault product or a Gulfstream or a Embraer Legacy, you can fly 1,000 hours because they're doing longer trips in between. But I think basically, and also we tried to raise a lot of funding for the model, and we couldn't get money raised. And actually, we were lucky that we couldn't get money raised, because having had them, although they were a good marketing tool for the entry level people coming on to go on to larger jets, it never really made us a lot of money. So that hence we got out of it and sold them off.
Ironically, by the time they delivered it, the market was already started. We had the global financial crisis. In some ways, it might be better to take them now. Might be the time for a small BLJ.
Yeah, I mean,
notwithstanding the problems you've said.
Yeah, but you have firms like Globair, Bernard Fragner. He's a really, really good guy. I mean, but even he admits it's tough going, getting the hours built up. He provides an extremely good service. You just have to clock the hours on them. And I think you come back to the fundamental point about people want total control over short trips, which means you can't get in a second trip or a third trip in the same day in general. Occasionally you can, but and so you're restricted on the time you can actually build the hours up.
Was that the biggest mistake you made as a company?
Yeah, probably. I'd say that. I mean, we'd been growing up until then. It didn't make us go into a loss situation, but it didn't expand at the rate that we expected it to. And I think that's probably the only. I mean, that's the only major mistake that we made. But we managed it, controlled it, and exited it without sort of too much pain.
What was it? How many sleepless nights have you had over the last 20 years because of work?
I don't sleep much anyway. Well, actually, for the last 2 years I do sleep, because I normally sleep about 3 to 4 hours a night. And I wake up every hour or so, and I have done ever since I've been a kid. But it transpires that I have sleep apnea, which has nothing to do with my illness. So during the night, I went along for a test in the hospital, and I stopped breathing 88 times an hour for periods of 10 seconds or more. So now when I go to bed, I'm like Darth Vader.
You have the PAP mask, yeah.
I have the CPAP mask over my mouth, and now, in the old days, to go to sleep took me forever. So now I just say goodnight to the wife and say, can I put it on? Are we doing anything else? She says no, and then I put the CPAP on, and it forces air into me, and I'm asleep within 5 to 10 minutes. And I sleep now for 6 or 7 hours at a time on the trot.
How many times did you have meetings with George where you were like, this is dreadful, what are we going to do? Because I think it's very different. If you're in a financier, you finance the aircraft, then unless something goes wrong, you don't have to worry about it constantly. But you've got planes flying around, you've got owners who are unhappy about catering. It's a tough business, isn't it?
It is. You've got to keep your hands on. You can't step back. That's I think some operators feel that when they get larger, they can step back. But the people, it's not in the skill set of the people who are purely managers, who don't have that sort of don't have that drive about them to make sure that things go right. And also, owners are quite strong-willed people. So there's a degree of yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. It is mainly sirs. We've had 1 or 2 ladies owning aircraft, but mainly males. They've been very successful in their businesses, so they're very forceful in their viewpoints. I think sometimes you have to be diplomatic and say, I hear what you say, but be aware of 1, 2, 3. I think a lot of people find that difficult to do.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to set up? You said your kids don't want to, but if someone else is watching this and goes, I want to set up an operator.
I'd say when we set up, it was comparatively easy to set up and continue. Now, it's a very hard slog because you own. Maybe Fister Jets got it right and NetJets have got it right in terms of owning their aircraft. I personally, on the outside, can't see how that model actually works in terms of profitability. But let's put those two aside. Large firms, you shouldn't be owning aircraft, so you're left with finding aircraft owners. Finding your first few owners is going to be very difficult because you've got no experience there. So you've got to have an existing relationship with an owner who's going to invest in you. So you're restricted by that owner and his aspirations or her aspirations in terms of where you're going. I think it's a lot harder now.
And do you regulatory wise, has it got harder?
We've got used to it. As an industry, I think it's highly regulated, and I can understand the need for tight regulation because of the nature and the safety issues surrounding the whole process of running as an operator. But we're just, sometimes it goes over the top. But actually, you have to accept what's given to you. You have to work with it. Try and get it changed if you believe it's necessary to change. But if you can't, you've just got to go with it and just say, this is what's required. This is what I will do. And again, attention to detail. You have to have somebody on the outside of each department looking in, checking to see what people are doing. You can't leave people to their own devices. That includes me and George as well within that.
You're retiring not because of COVID, but you're retiring at a time when most of your fleet's grounded. Do you think the next few years are going to be worse than the global financial crisis, or is it too early to say?
I think overall it's too early. My investment portfolio hasn't crashed in the way it crashed in 2008. It's been very defensive. And I suspect it could be a major world crisis. And I'm probably talking against what everybody else sees. But people are beginning to fly in small doses. I think we'll see a minor peak in the minimum when people get back, when countries open up to flying, because they won't want to fly commercial, perhaps. And when the commercial boys get up and running, the people that were spending, the new entrants may go back to them. But actually, I think still people will still have a need to fly. But I think a lot of people will start using Teams and Zoom more so than before. So I actually think that the jury is out as to whether there's going to be a deep recession in terms of how it's going to affect our business sector. I'm accepting that there may be a global problem, but I don't think it will affect us as badly as the 2008. And if I'm proved wrong, that's fine. I hope I'm right.
Do you think we're going to see operators shut down? Is now the time we're going to see? Because consolidation hasn't really happened, because every hangar 8 that merges with Gamma or LEA being bought by Luxaviation, someone else launches another one.
I think we will see some people closing down and getting out. I think probably on the smaller operator. I can't remember the numbers now. The majority of operators are operating 2 to 4 aircraft, aren't they still? And I think it's still at 85% or something like that. So the opportunity for consolidation is always getting smaller. The market for big potential targets is getting smaller. But I still think we'll see the minnows coming in. We were a minnow when we started, and that's probably the best way to start. But the number of large operators who have a realistic expectation on their pricing and what they're worth, I suspect, is quite limited.
Do you worry about things like we're seeing opportunities with airlines not being around? Do you worry about things like environmental pressures?
I think environmental pressure is an extremely important issue which has to be solved by every business sector. I mean, I know we all know that aviation only represents 0.03%, but it's the perception about people have about our aviation. And I think the more we try and address with the OEMs for more fuel efficient, better ways of flying. So for example, I do see the eVTOLs for short journeys, the eVTOLs at the conference that you do, the Revolution Aero conference. I think that's going to be a way for a lot of short trips, and most trips are actually quite short. They're sort of up to 50 minutes to an hour. And I can see that then becoming all electric. So would you a change?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've always found it. You're one of the few established operators who I think a lot of people are very skeptical about the sector. Yeah, you and Lux are one of the few operators who I think are looking at it really carefully.
Yeah, I'm skeptical from the perspective of the man in the nut house who sort of goes in and says, I come from Mars, and everybody else says we're from Mars too. And we had it with the air taxi firm, but I think you have to be realistic about what can be achieved, both in timeline and the actual end result. So the air taxis it's going to happen overnight within 4 or 5 years. Wrong. Time period will be longer than that, and it's going to happen, and it's going to expand rapidly. Wrong again. There are not going to be thousands of little mini flying around. With the electrical vehicles, though, so long as they can solve the ground infrastructure and the charging infrastructure, then I think there's certainly a viable option for moving business people and people for pleasure over short distances.
So looking back on your career, what was your biggest achievement?
Getting married to my wife.
That's a nice one.
What's my big?
And actually, it would never have happened without her. If she hadn't bought you that flying lesson.
Exactly, you got it in one, Al. I would never have met Kim Wiley. Kim Wiley would never have introduced me to George and Amanda.
How many times have you had arguments with George or Amanda, or both?
Amanda, never. George, I can recollect three or four big arguments. I mean, there are disagreements in all relationships. You know, it is like a marriage, a relationship. But I think the advantage is that we have initially respected each other's capabilities and realised our deficiencies as well. So I realised I didn't know much about aviation. George realised he knew a lot about flying, but he didn't know a lot about running a business. So we had very minimal arguments. And actually, the arguments were they were quite polite arguments, actually. They weren't sort of aggressive. I mean, I think I've raised my voice to George once in the office. It shocked everybody. George has raised them back maybe a couple of times with me. That's about it. And that's over a quarter of a century. I've lost count how many times I've had an argument with my wife, though.
Never.
No, dear me.
How many times have you won an argument with your wife?
That's an easy one. Nada.
Do you, it's amazing though, to keep going for 25 years without, arguing with George and not arguing. Would you, could you have done it on your own?
Possibly, but it would have been, it could have failed en route. I actually think that we both, on balance, I would say I wouldn't have done it on my own. And on balance, I think George says he couldn't do it on his own either. But you best ask George to see whether that's his view as well. What's
been the most frustrating thing in the industry? What's the thing which really niggles you?
Ooh, on a day-to-day basis, up until the last couple of years, it's been pilots. I forever fall in the trap of thinking that most pilots are just like you and I, but there are some pilots, albeit a small percentage. It's like the rotten apple in the nice basket of apples. Most are fantastic, but the one rotten one can actually dig up and infect the other apples that are actually there, which is a real shame. But I think it's the nature of the beast that becomes a pilot. They're very strong-willed, very independent, very sure of themselves, and that's actually a very good, positive thing to be, as long as it's accommodating other people around you.
And also, they're not in the office. So you're basically getting these very strong-willed people and saying, go off and do your thing, and have very minimal contact with them as well.
Yeah, I mean, for the first 15 years, we used to have very regular office outings with the flight attendants or with the pilots or with the office or everybody. And a lot of people when we were smaller, a lot of people would turn up to the office just to help out in the office, which they don't do now because we're bigger and that's not the nature of what our product is. And we'd meet up for drinks in the evening and have a beer, have a curry. We've lost that element because that's going to be inevitable, that you're going to lose that as you get bigger and bigger and you get more of an institution.
And after pilots, what else has really niggled at you?
The one thing, and this applies to, I think, to any industry, when somebody comes to me with a problem and they stop and say, I have a problem, I can't get into Antwerp. And that's where they stop thinking and stop talking. And I go, and what have you thought about how to solve this? Well, I've come to you. So that was my biggest frustration. People don't think they hit a problem and they come to me and George for a solution. Whereas actually we try to impress upon people, if you hit a problem, work out what the problem is, what the solution might be, or solutions. Try and work them out. If you can't, come to me and say, I've had this problem with X, Y, Z. I've looked at ABC. I'm stuck. I'm not sure whether I should go B or C. It's getting people to go that last mile, because once they start doing that, they're worried about doing that and taking a decision. But once they start to do it and see, they become empowered. They start to become empowered. That means that they come back and start doing it less. But that's been probably the second most frustrating thing that I've noticed in the industry.
Have you found it hard to hire people?
No, pilots, not particularly. Operational staff, yes, because there's a limited number of operational staff and people, it's comparatively low pay compared to other industries. So people need to be in the local area, living in the local area. And although we have some people that come from south of the river, one or two, most people want to be in and around Stapleford or Stansted. And the same applies to other companies in Farnborough. Most of the employees are going to be comparatively close to where Farnborough Airport is. I think that's the critical part that you have to take account of. So there is a limited supply of good operational people.
You've had to deal with Brexit and every EU regulation flying into. Do you ever look over and go, I wish I'd set this business up in the US?
My wife says, would I like to move to America? I love visiting America, but I wouldn't like to live there. And from my limited information, my limited viewpoint about how the business aviation sector works there's a very, very large number of small mama and papa operations. So someone will say they look after 20 aircraft when they might do a flight plan and they say that's an aircraft. And I think it's probably, to do well, is harder in America than it is in Europe if you work at it.
Okay, and finally, what are you going to do to fill your time now? You're retiring.
Well, I'm not retiring full time, so I'm going to be part time. And the plan is I'll hopefully attend more conferences that you organise, and you'll have me on, and you'll be able to listen to me wax lyrical or not, as the case may be, about what's going on in the industry. And I'll still help out on a couple of our key contract works that we sort of have running. But I'm going to go back to learning the piano. That's number one. I'm going to try to learn to sing, which my family don't want me to try because they've heard me have a go. I'm going to take up golf, which I did take up about 9 months ago. So I'm a novice golfer, but starting at the grand old age of 60, I think it was. So it's just over a year that I've been learning golf. And I'm going to look out to do some charity work as well to contribute back into the community.
Are you looking forward to it?
I am, but I've deliberately not put in place a detailed plan. I'm beginning now, there's only a week to go, thinking maybe I should have planned this a bit more.
And it's a shame because you would have had a huge party at eBay to announce your resignation, retirement.
There was a big town hall meeting of the group yesterday, I think, actually, or where we're now, Thursday. And Patrick did announce to everybody else that I was departing, but he's promised me a big party when we come out of COVID-19, so you'll probably get invited too.
Whenever that is. Or social distancing, 2 meters apart.
Yeah.
And so no regrets. No regrets.
I've had a very good life, so I can't complain. To be honest, I can't complain about it at all. No, I've done what I've enjoyed. I've had my moments, obviously. I've had my frustrations, but in the weighing scale terms, I'm sort of 95, 98% happy.
That's good. 95, 98. You can't argue with that.
I'm surprised. I look back at it. What else would I have done? Maybe I would have won the lottery. But what would I have done with the extra money in the lottery? Not a lot.
You'd have bought a plane, another plane.
Well, I have owned a plane before, though. So, but I sold that in October 2008, at the time of the on the crash, and someone had made an offer, and then they phoned up to reduce the price. I said, no, the price is the price, and the time is the time. I agreed a date, and they said they wanted it early. I said, no, it's got a commitment to a flight on next week, so you can't have it early. They said, well, we may not be able to buy it. And I said, well, don't buy it then. If we've agreed a price, stick to it. And that's a good thing I got out of it then.
That was an acrobatic plane, wasn't it?
No. I had a Piper Chieftain, sort of twin engine seat, 8 people. I mean, I've still got an aerobatic plane. I haven't flown aerobatics now for some time. But I used to, in the 90s, I used to do aerobatic competitions in a Pitts S2A, which I still co-share with somebody. So I don't think I've flown it for 2 years, 3 years, actually. Been so busy at work.
Retirement?
My wife doesn't want me to go back in. We'll have to see.
You just say you're going to play golf. No,
it's probably best that I don't, actually, for health reasons. I wouldn't get my medical back.
Thanks so much, Patrick.